So we have a very august set of panelists over here, and I'm very grateful to them that they could take our time and be here. I don't need to give any more introduction to them, and because they are all very well known, and also because we're running out of time. Would rather like to hear what they have to say than spend time in getting into a very illustrious background that each one of them bring in here. Misusing my role as the moderator, I'll be the only one who will use the presentation, and I will prevent them from accessing the media of presentation to access the rest of you. And I'm sure you're pretty much familiar with which other institutions do that. So I'll misuse my role as a moderator and quickly give a background of what this session is all about. So if you look at the political landscape in India, India is a nation of minorities. You know, every single entity is a minority. And what is a minority? It's a set of people who behave in a specific manner. From a political perspective, they have similar political requirements, and their predictable response pattern, and they vote similarly. And that's exactly what a minority is. So if you look at Bengalis, there will be about 7% of the population. Telugus are 8.8% of the population. And even then, they don't behave in a very cohesive manner from a political perspective. Given that background, there is one minority which is growing extremely fast. It consists of traders, businessmen, ordinary professional people who have a perceived strong value system, people who want to see India as an economic power, upwardly mobile, educated youth contributing to the growing numbers, and they form part of this minority, access to more information, and hence highly aware and opinionated. And this is the minority, what we call as middle class. And it seems to be growing very fast, and they seem to be behaving in one simple fashion. And why are they important? As of 2004, which is almost 8-9 years back, there was 241 million of the so-called minority, which is about 20% of the population. It's only constituency which is actually growing fast. When the middle class grows, some other class must be becoming smaller. Some other section must be becoming smaller because the middle class is growing. It is not as invisible politically as we think it is, because we know that the middle class don't vote. It's a common joke. You know, they talk, they would like to sit in a stage like this, and they would like to talk like the way I'm talking, but they won't go and vote. But however, by just the fact that they don't go and vote also shows that they behave in a particular fashion. So if they can be made to vote, it is a section which is extremely important. So what? So why are we talking about this little section of the population? This minority has access to many sources of information. They have access to the internet, social networking, blogs, Twitters, Facebooks, all those dangerous things. They got access to all these dangerous things as Twitters, blogs. They can destroy the universe. And therefore, they have the ability to bypass the conventional media to express opinions that would otherwise not be possible. So they can reach out, they can convey what they want to convey. Some people, they can possibly reach out to some people, they may not be able to reach out, but at least they've got a media to reach out, and that's called the internet. And therefore, it is a very different ballgame that we're talking about. So what? If they have access to this media, so what happens? What we have is pictures from the famous Tahrir Square, but that's not all. We also got pictures from Ramlila. We also got pictures from Wall Street, the Occupy Wall Street movement. So you got from the West, the East, and the Middle East. So everything has had the impact of internet. We have had crowds coming in because of the way internet interplayed and ensured that people can be brought together on a single platform. I'm sure many of you are aware that in 1857, in 1856, when the Sepoy Mutiny happened, the way to put together people was passing the chapatis and the lotus. There are similar communication channels that have opened up through the internet now, and it's subterranean. When the chapatis and the rotis were passed through, it was not visible to the so-called government at that point in time. And so similar channels are coming up which makes the communication subterranean, and you can have large crowds coming up overnight without even the government realizing it. And we saw that happening in Korea when a 13-year-old girl started putting up a internet movement to get people to come to the town center and protest against beef imports from US. The next day morning, there was a huge amount of crowd at the town center in Seoul. And that's the power of internet. So is it about crowd mobilization? Are we only talking about the civil society getting mobilized? And we've got Shivendu from the team Anna, who can probably throw some more light on how to do crowd mobilization and what's the impact of that on the civil society. But it's not just about crowd mobilization. If you look at the electioneering that happened, the last elections, the presidential elections in US, and here is some results from that particular election. 54% of adults use the internet for political purposes. 73% of the adult internet users went online to get news or information about the 2010 midterm elections. Previous research had also found that 22% of online American adults used social network sites like Twitter and so on and so forth. So a whole bunch of statistics. I don't need to back up what I'm saying with these statistics. I mean, all of us are aware of what happened. And is India any different? I think it's just a lag, and I'll leave it to the August panelists to put in their views. But these are some statistics, some facts, and we'll look forward to what the panelists have to say on this kind of a development. There's also a trickle-down effect, and again, some of the panelists may or may not disagree. There is a little bit of trickle-down from English newspapers and English studios to the vernacular. What we are also seeing is a trickle-down from the internet to the English media to the vernacular, which is where the internet starts becoming extremely important. And that is actually what the mechanism of communication looks like as of now. So you've got all kinds of communication, from pigeons to newspapers to post offices to the so-called dangerous Facebooks and so on and so forth. But the important effect is a long tail effect on politics, which is that, if you're all aware of what the long tail effect is, that because of the internet you can go and reach out to the smallest segment in the market. Similarly, in the business of politics, one can reach out to the smallest segment in the polity. So a single working woman becomes a set of people who have specific requirements, and the internet can actually reach out to them and provide a specific need and address a specific need for them, politically speaking. And therefore, that's the kind of impact the internet has. It can personalize the political requirements and reach out to the various segments in a society. And after the election is over, so internet is not just an impact on the election, but after the election is over, we also see the impact of internet on policy making. We've got a Facebook site on India Against Corruption, we've got an RTI site, we've got many other movements which came up. There was a movement against the nuclear deal, which all was fueled by the internet. So it's not just the electioning process. E-politics also has an impact on policy making once the government has come into power, and which is a very different equation that we had earlier. We used to have what we traditionally call as indirect democracy, which is once we elect somebody, and that's what we were talking about in the previous session, we elect somebody and then we wash our hands off, and whoever we have elected takes care of all policy making. But here is a change dynamic that even after the election process is over, the citizen can exert pressure and get the policy making done in favor of what they think is the most appropriate way of doing the policy. And finally, therefore, if there is interference in governance, if there is an impact on politics, there also is a perceived threat to freedom of internet. And there are some of these examples that we have over here where there was a perception that the internet was misused to target some politicians. There was a perception from the civil society that the government is trying to muzzle the internet. We exactly don't know where the truth is, but there is a lot of interplay and dynamics going on. And that's where we have this panel. And without much ado, I'll stop over here, and I'll request the panelists to put in their views. I'll start with you, sir, Prananjay, and hear your views on these three matters. And I look forward to hearing from you.